The 2021 summit is a collaboration between LIM College and FashionDex.com. This year's sponsors are Tex World New York City and Apparel Sourcing New York City. I would like to invite Nancy Miller to come and welcome you all. Nancy.
Thank you, Monica. I'd like to begin by introducing myself. I'm Nancy Miller. I'm the chair of fashion merchandising and marketing here at LIM College. And it's wonderful to have you all here, both near and far, on behalf of the college, where sustainability is part not only of our curriculum, but part of our core values. It is my honor to kick off the 4th Annual Sustainability Summit. Today, we have assembled many thought leaders and agents of change. We have lots of speakers. We have students who are going to be a part of today. And I think you're going to learn and share and converse. So again, I'd like to thank you on behalf of LIM College and FashionDex.
This is a collaboration of LIM College and FashionDex.com. We are sponsored by Tex World New York City and Apparel Sourcing New York City. At this point, I would like to introduce our next panel, Reducing Waste with Fabscrap and Free People. We have with us Jessica Schrieber of Fabscrap, Julie Verdugo of Free People, Nancy Miller of LIM College, and Jenna Filingeri of LIM College. I'm going to now turn this over to Nancy.
Good afternoon and welcome. It's a pleasure to be here along with Jenna to talk with Jessica and Julie about reducing waste. And before we get started, I think 4 years ago at the first summit, Jessica, I may have introduced you when you attended LIM. So it's great to be talking with you again. And Julie, we've crossed paths over the last year or two with lots of projects. So it's really terrific to be able to talk with you today. So I'll get started and basically I think we'd love to hear how each of you found your way to Jessica Fabscrap and Julie Free People and the work that you're doing. So both of you have the letter J, so I think Jessica alphabetically might go first. So Jessica, we know that you started with the Department of Sanitation, but please tell everyone how you started Fabscrap. We'd love to hear it.
Sure. Thanks for having me. It's so nice to see everybody. Fabscrap is a New York City-based nonprofit that works with the fashion industry to collect excess material from the design process and recycle or redistribute it. We've been in operation 5 years now. And yes, prior to that, I was working at New York City's Department of Sanitation. I was overseeing the city's clothing recycling program, Refashion NYC, when it launched in 2011 until I left in 2016. And it was through running that program that I learned a lot about clothing waste, about the thrift infrastructure, fast fashion, and where clothing goes, and donation versus recycling. And it was also where brands started to ask what they should be doing or could be doing with their excess material that wasn't clothing yet. All of the waste that happens in making clothing, designing clothing, and the samples and the swatches. And there really wasn't a great place to send them. Some were donating a bit to schools, but schools can't accept everything from every brand that exists in New York City. There's just not capacity. Same thing with like small arts projects. And so I pulled all of those brands that were reaching out to me at Sanitation into a working group, and to their credit, very non-competitively, they shared a lot about the problem and some of the solutions they had found or couldn't find. And that's what led to Fabscrap, which is essentially we collect all of that excess and then sort it for reuse or recycling. And then we make it available to fashion students, artists, crafters, home sewers, new brands, so that they can save material from landfill while creating something new. And that's how I came into fashion by way of trash.
Wow, so it's been 5 years. That's remarkable. Wow, okay, great. All right, Julie, how about you? Tell us how you started, and now being the Director of Sustainability at Free People. Tell us your story.
Yeah, so great to be here, everyone, and nice to see familiar faces too. And I just love Jess's story because I have to say, so many of us talk about waste in the industry, but Jess, you are the only one I know who's worked at the Department of Sanitation and worked her way into the fashion industry. I just think it's so fascinating. And I'm like, well, everything Jess says is correct. So listen up. My background is also kind of starting in like an obsession with waste in a way. My first degree is in industrial and operations engineering, and I was always into creative world of fashion as a hobby, I thought, but I had to be an engineer because that was a real job. That's what I was told growing up in the Midwest in Detroit. You got to get an engineer job at an automotive manufacturer. So that's what I thought I was going to be entering into. But I realized it was really the study of how things are made. And in doing so, I really found a passion for the Toyota production system, lean manufacturing, which is all about waste reduction. And it's really an obsession of a science that is, reducing work in progress, only producing to a demand, not overproducing, like the anti-Henry Ford type of way. And it just got me thinking differently. And after internships in factories, and then I worked for a couple of years as an engineer in factories, studying, trying to reduce waste, really for business purposes, more so than like the environmental goodness factor. I sort of realized that was a secondary aspect, and that was sort of speaking to my values of wanting to support community along the way. So it just got me thinking differently about how could things in different industries be made, or how can we design systems that naturally create less waste. And then following my passion into fashion, like why is the fashion industry not keeping up with what some of the things and innovations that were going on in the automotive or aerospace industry? And a very winding path. I've spent a lot of time working in nonprofits. I got my MBA, but all the while kind of connecting dots and connecting pieces to then get to a place where I was working, in the urban group, and said, like, there's room for so much more. How do we do this formally? How do we leverage a lot of the good work that's already been done, but a lot of customers don't know about? And then how do we make this official so that we can gain momentum, start investing in sustainability, and start looking at our own supply chains and our own waste systems and how we support community. So it's a journey that is not over and just beginning really for us. I mean, we formalized this just a couple of years ago, and now I'm working with Urban Outfitters as well. So we're working on it, but yeah, that's how I got here.
Thank you. It's remarkable, Jessica, from the beginning, looking back into 5 years ago, and then Julie, your story of from then until now, how much has changed and how early interests really have shaped the work that you do now. So it's remarkable to hear. Jenna, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Alrighty. I also wanted to say that it's super interesting that both of you came from a windy path, and up until now, the path to sustainability has been all over the place and it hasn't been direct. And finally, we're just now formalizing it, and LIM now has our sustainability minor, which is so exciting. So it's like finally happening that we are getting like educated in this so that we can actually make like change, which is really exciting. But I love how you guys both found your way to it regardless. It's really, really inspiring. But jumping right into our next question, we just wanted to talk a little bit about some of your sustainability objectives and targets within your company. And is it a part of your company's mission at this point to kind of integrate sustainability? And if you could just tell us a little bit about the goals that you've been working on. Anybody can jump in first.
I can go first because ours is pretty direct. I think it's easy to feel like we're checking all the boxes around sustainability because we're helping so many other companies be more sustainable. But there's a lot that we're trying to do internally too. I think one of the things that you first notice when you visit the warehouse is this giant pile of black plastic bags that's filled with fabric swatches and headers. And that's all material that we still have to sort through. But it's really hard to see that amount of plastic in one place. And so while it still is the cheapest way for us to store everything while still keeping it separate by brand so we can provide brand data, we do try and reuse as many of those bags as possible until we can't repair the holes, and they're just like really irreplaceable, so or unusable. So we're reusing all of the bags. When we get deliveries, we keep all of the pallets and use all of the pallets. Sorry. So we're trying to reduce our own waste as we go, and thinking through our systems. And that's also including like how we're routing trucks and how we're choosing to ship things, and reusing boxes as our shipping boxes, or trying to reduce as much as we can our footprint, even as we're doing waste diversion work.
Yeah, I mean, ours is definitely a little less direct, but it also stems from plastic, pesky plastic for sure. I mean, for us, the plastic bags we overutilize are our poly bags. So plastic is one of our first, one of the big pillars that we're trying to focus on as a public company with many brands under the umbrella, Anthro, Urban, Free People. Newly has a more innovative packaging, reusable, which is amazing. But for the brands that are producing product, the poly bag is right now still necessary in our production process as things move through our distribution centers. But we are starting to incorporate post-consumer plastic in the creation of it. And we're trying to find a good partner for a biodegradable bag that will swap out that plastic. And we also have a recycling program that's launching this month to recycle and reuse to go to a composite decking material, all of those bags, but we're really trying to find ways to get the plastic out of the system. It's really difficult. That's a big one. Product is a huge part of, obviously, it's our DNA, it's our bread and butter. So we have been working on increasing our eco-conscious offering. So that's product that contains traceably different certifications of eco-conscious fabrics like Euro linens, or it could be even like a Reprieve recycled nylon. Obviously, our natural fibers are king and queen, they're the very best, but increasing that footprint across all of our product ranges. And it looks a little bit different for different brands. At Free People, currently we have over 800 styles that fit those certifications for us, those qualifications. And we're trying to grow that. So that is tripled from the year before, and we're trying to keep that momentum going. And then finally, energy is something that, it's not literal to the product, but it's something that is really important to the company. And we're building a new distribution center in the south of the US, but our current one in Pennsylvania in Gap, it has a wildly large array of solar panels. It's a 22-acre array, actually, and saves all sorts of energy. And that's something that we want to continue to, like I said, as we're increasing into a new distribution center, growing alternative energy usage, and seeing how we can grow that into stores as well.
That is so exciting to hear about all the things that you guys are working on. It kind of follows into my next question, which you guys have already kind of talked about, your goals for minimizing your waste. It sounds like both of you are really advocating to, reduce your own waste even within the company and your supply chain as much as you can. But I was wondering if you guys had any like specific goals maybe that you're working on towards circularity. I was wondering, Jessica, you were talking about using plastic garbage bags. I was wondering if maybe you guys had considered even like cloth or anything other than that, biodegradable. So any other things you'd like to add on those?
Yeah, I mean, when we're working with brand partners, the bags that we send out are reusable, and they just have barcodes on them so that when they return full to our warehouse, we know where they came from. And so when we're working externally, we're using reusable bags. Those bags are not as cheap to store the material we receive in bags by brand until we're able to sort them. For as quickly as fashion moves and as much material as we receive, it's about 6,000 to 8,000 pounds a week. We're not sorting through at that rate. If you volunteered with Fabscrap before, you know it's a big deal when you sort through a bag. It takes 3 to 5 hours to remove all the staples, the stickers, headers, etc. And so it's still the cheapest way for us to keep things as organized as possible. But we're looking at other options, particularly for once things are sorted, how we can move them within the warehouse in a way that doesn't include plastic bags, or move them between locations, or move them to the shredder that doesn't include plastic bags.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that too. I mean, on the subject of bags, it is one of the early initiatives that Free People had, because we've never used single-use plastic shopping bags for our customers, which is a nice little treat. And then we further incentivize, if you skip a bag altogether, we donate to the National Park Foundation, one of our longstanding nonprofits. But that's kind of that's like let's say a peripheral aspect. Like obviously the product piece is the massive one for us. So that's really something that with the team, we've been trying to take a really active stance on the last 2 years in particular. And, you know, sitting on inventory and making sure that we're taking responsibility for every piece of clothing that we produce, and even the work in progress, which I'll get to in a second. But finished goods, we've been building out new systems for where do those go to avoid landfill. So we have a donation program with The Wardrobe, which is a really great nonprofit in Philly that provides free, they either sell it through their shops, which raises money for their mission, or they give it to the community who is in, well, now they've expanded to men's as well, and they're addressing people coming through the prison system, people who are coming out of unemployment. So we have a great partnership with them. We also have a partnership with Poshmark for actually reselling finished goods. And then the work in progress piece is we're really excited because we didn't really have a good solution for this before. The reason why Fabscrap was so great is now we're partnering with Fabscrap. So it's all coming full circle here, but it's one of the initiatives that everyone at Urban across all brands is most excited about, because it, you know, the industry, we're able to find those, where can we donate our new with tags clothing? Like that's not easy. Like we shouldn't be overproducing and doing that, but there are destinations for that. Work in progress fabric is a whole other ball game. And that's why Fabscrap is so unique. So we're so excited that you guys are growing to Philadelphia officially like this week. And yeah, the timing is pretty perfect for this because there's so much excitement. But that, you know, Fabscrap is going to be our number one and only work in progress fabric recycling opportunity for circularity.
That's incredibly exciting. That's so awesome. I think I can hand it over to Nancy for the next question that we have.
I'm wondering if we can pick up and Jessica, ask you a little bit about what your plans are going to Philadelphia, if you wouldn't mind, before I get to the next question. I'm curious, like maybe everyone else is too.
Yeah, I'm very, very happy to share. It's been a work in progress for almost a year now, and we just publicly shared the location and opening date last week. So I'm so excited to actually be able to share details. We are opening November 15th, which worked with our move-in, but also happens to be America Recycles Day. So that was a happy coincidence. And we're going to be located in South Philadelphia in the Bach Building, which was an old, very large trade school. And so now it's full of small businesses and makers and small manufacturers local to Philly. And we'll be on one of the top floors in what used to be the school cafeteria. So I'm really excited to have the open space and be bringing Fabscrap to the Philadelphia maker community. We had a team member who was able to attend Philadelphia Fashion Week, which was really cool. We'll be working with the Urban brands as soon as we open But we'll be open for volunteering and shopping right away on November 15th and starting service with other brands as we ramp up.
Wow, that's great. I think Andrea definitely wants to join that. Right, Andrea? I see you. Great. Thanks for sharing, Jessica. So the next question, it circles around COVID-19, the pandemic, and how that has impacted your sustainability efforts. What wrenches it through, how you work through them, or how you're continuing to work through them. So Julie, we'll start with you, please.
Sure. I mean, picking up sort of from the excess inventory conversation, or, the circularity of finished goods, that was definitely something that the pandemic, so many orders were canceled for us and all of our stores closed. So, we found ourselves with inventory and refusing to send any of it to waste or to non-transparent options, which absolutely exists in the industry, jobbers. We don't really know where a lot of that stuff goes sometimes. And we vowed that it would just not go that route. So circularity was something we, researching what could be the best option when, and there was just never a best time. And we were sort of ready. And so as soon as it was actually before the city was shut down, I was chatting with Poshmark, and they hadn't had partnerships with brand partners before. And as things started to look a little bit fishy at the same time, it was sort of like, well, what if we create something with you guys? I mean, we're basically a seller. Let's just think a little more large scale. And it was, that partnership was sort of a true silver lining of COVID, I would say. I think it's been a win-win for their platform. They just had their big press release this week. And those inventory options, I would say, are great band-aids, because obviously the root of the problem is overproducing. And of course, we didn't know about the pandemic, but in a way, the secondhand marketplace, circularity, it's a nice band-aid for overproduction. And we're trying to get to the root of that cause too, but it opened our eyes to, what solutions do we have now for circularity? And then on a very, I would say more pressing note, something else that opened our eyes was everything else that came along with the pandemic. So a more intersectional approach to sustainability, and not just thinking about our fibers and fabrics directly, but thinking about community. And when, who do we even consider when we say community? We're just talking about customers? Are we just talking about people producing our clothes? Like, what about people in our own backyard? And what about the people in the cities we live in? What about marginalized communities that we have had blind spots to? So I think that opened up our eyes to being more inclusive in our approach to sustainability and making sure it wasn't ever a choice of privilege. And it kind of got us thinking, like, product wise, that if we're making something sustainable, we have to be delivering on the price points that our customers are used to. Or if we're supporting communities in need, like, let's make sure we're finding the ones that truly need it, and who is of need right now, and kind of reassessing all of our values all at once, like so many of us did.
What about continued challenges? I think, we're almost 2 years into the pandemic. The supply chain issues are certainly a topic we've addressed today. Has that been something that you and Free People have been working through like everyone else?
Oh yeah. I mean, the supply chain issues are still massive. I mean, going into holiday, I know we're at a very heightened stress time right now. We have our big buys on order, product that everyone's excited about, and we don't know if it's going to arrive on time, and therefore we don't know if we'll hit our sales goals, and therefore we don't know if we'll end up with product that isn't hitting at the right time, which then could lead to excess waste, excess inventory. So, working with the buyers to figure out what are clever ways to not over order out of fear, but working with the suppliers, ordering earlier, not going so on trend or seasonal, so that things don't become irrelevant if they're late. But it's certainly still a challenge.
Right. Thank you. And Jessica, how about you? How has COVID COVID-19 reshaped your business model and challenges you faced and maybe be going through now?
Yeah, I think as a small business owner who is already, stretched sometimes to try and figure out how a business and a nonprofit business works in the world in a really new field of textile waste and recycling, I was a little thrown off and there were no answers. I think that was the hardest part, was there was no one who had been through it before and there were no answers. And so I think any business was just doing the best that they could. We closed pretty early and all employees went to work from home. And then eventually we were down to 50% hours just so we could conserve while we were closed. But the second that New York State said 1 employee at a time can return to the office, I was back at our shop in Manhattan to ship online orders. So I will say our online store really kept us afloat for the months that our physical locations were closed, even when it was 1 employee at a time going in to fill as many orders as they could that day. So I think it just set everything in motion in a different pace and kind of made us reevaluate what our priorities were. I think it was hard to not see volunteers every day and just immediately sort of lose that sense of community and who we were working for. One thing that I'll say is, as soon as I could be back in the office and doing online orders, that means other people were back in the office and the waste came back almost immediately. We were getting pickup requests and service requests almost immediately. And some of those were mid-move, people downsizing and they needed to clean out an office. And so waste was created, or unfortunately businesses who were closing and didn't want to just send stuff to landfill. So the waste stream didn't change in like volume or cadence, but it took a little while for our staff to be able to like ramp back up to that same volume. We did do a nice pivot, I think, for community members to digital workshops. We were every other week and now once a month, trying to find ways to give people ideas for what to do with all of their fabric, and also support our local makers. So we were offering stipends to creative professionals to skill share at a free event where people could learn things like making leather wallets or leather keychains. We did a denim macrame plant hanger. We did natural dyeing. We did basics of hand sewing. So really finding ways to kind of bring people together still. And thankfully it was, with everybody being at home, sort of like the resurgence of hobby. And so a lot of people picked up sewing and I think we got a lot of new orders that way. And it was nice to see people wanting to pick up a new hobby, but do it sustainably and feel good about where they were getting their material from. So yeah, kind of a shift all around. I wouldn't say that like we're recovered. I think we're still seeing a lot of the effects. Our shopping appointments are still by appointment. We're definitely limiting volunteers, but it is nice to have people back in the space.
Wow, it definitely sounds like it's, as a small business owner, it's been very transformational. And then you almost don't know what could be coming around the corner. Like, for example, how the pandemic spurred a lot of people to do a lot of home crafting and then the need for all the fabric. So I guess being adaptable and resilient are things that a lot of us have discovered over the last 18, 19. I don't know what month we're up to actually. Right? Okay. All right, Jenna, I'm going to turn it over to you for the next couple questions.
I was going to say that I was definitely one of those people in the middle of the pandemic that placed an order to do my online sewing or like sewing at home. I was so bored, and I obviously heard of you guys, but I couldn't get to like a fabric store. So I had ordered stuff. So that was definitely me.
Oh, thanks.
So we've been talking a lot about the progress that you guys have been making, but we would love to know how or if you guys are able to measure it in terms of like numbers, and how do you see your progress, as the business has been going. And Julie, for you, the introduction of your role in Free People. and anybody can go ahead.
I'll jump in. I mean, I'll jump in even though this is a really tough one, I'd say, because I think that as a company, well, in the space in general, it's really difficult to goal set. I mean, I love the optimism conversation that Marcel and Carrie and Logan were talking about in the last panel, because a lot of us are optimistic. And as a brand, you want to be optimistic if you're leading the sustainability initiatives, but you don't want to be optimistic in terms of putting out goals that you may not be able to achieve, i.e. greenwashing. In some cases, it could turn into this. So I have to say, as an organization, we struggle with putting out high-level goals because we truly believe that we shouldn't be getting credit for things that we're not actively doing. So everything we're actively doing, we share. And the goal setting is like, we're not an organization that, well, we are committed to finding a biodegradable solution to plastics, but for something that we're not actively working on, we haven't said like by 2025, we will have 100% biodegradable fibers, because we don't know how to get there right now. We know that we want to increase and continue to grow at the rate we have been and faster. So like I said, we've grown 3x for our sustainable product offering relative to total offering, and we want to continue on that path. But the goal setting piece, like the progress to goals, is such a challenge. Every year we set goals which they basically stay. There's a lot of internal reporting, and we do set goals and we measure our progress to those goals. But I think we do have a ways to go to really be fully transparent and bold enough to say, hey, this is a goal. We might not get there, and we'll tell you where we're at by the end of the year. I think a lot of brands do that well. I think Reformation does that well. I think Patagonia does that well. And I think it's something we're still working on.
I really appreciate your honesty in that, because you are such a big company that works with a lot of other sister companies. And in that space, it's really hard, like, as you said, to have a reachable goals that you can openly and confidently talk about. So I really appreciate your honesty. And I do think that, being such a big company, you have to start somewhere. So any step is kind of a step in the right direction. So as long as that's being like given to the customers, I think that that's appreciative. And as a customer, you can appreciate it,
Yeah, I mean, it is, we get tempted sometimes because we know the customer would like to hear by 2025, we will be plastic free. But it's sort of like, we've talked about that so many times, where if we don't know exactly the path, even if we think we have the path, because there are unknowns, we don't feel good to take the credit for that. But I think there's some progress that we can make in terms of the communication of that, and again, to the transparency.
Right. And Jessica, you can jump in.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is coming from the waste management background, but we measure everything. It's also like, I think, just part of being a nonprofit where we really want to document where everything goes and how our operations work, that we really like track everything that we do. So we know how many volunteers we have every month. We know how many of them are new versus repeat. And one of our goals is to be reaching new people, but retaining our current volunteer base. So, building our community. And I think all of that are educational points too. And so we're tracking things like this, like the public education that we do and how many people attend, how often do we get to talk about commercial textile waste and the scale of the problem, the types of solutions. Obviously, we're measuring the waste coming in. We're measuring it in a bunch of different sorted categories, and then we measure what leaves, so we kind of know our throughput and what our redistribution rates are. I think one of our biggest goals is to give away as much fabric as we sell. And we are close most years. I think we're at like 46% as opposed to 50-50. it's hard. We have been selling a lot of fabric, and we let volunteers take fabric home for free. We work with a lot of organizations, but that's one of the ones that we're really focused on, like remaining an accessible materials resource, and working with educators and arts projects and other nonprofits to redistribute material that they need. So yeah, we're really tracking everything. And so like our annual report is basically just photos and numbers. All of them are on our website, but I think that kind of transparency helps, like it helps that we're a nonprofit. And so that kind of transparency is somewhat required and somewhat, I think, due to anyone who donates and like supports our work. And so I wouldn't say that like all companies should aim for that level of transparency, but I do think talking about where things fall short or steps that are taken, even if they're not the end goal, but it's a step towards it, I do think those things are important to share. And so even little changes and updates, I think it's great when companies can share what they're doing.
That, to your point, I mean, Jess, I know I've seen your impact reports and they're great. We're working on our first one right now. So yeah, we're working on it. So everyone stay tuned. We'll spread it widely, and we're working on that, you know, how do we speak to our shortcomings and like stay totally transparent. This is not a report card of like, look at all the good we've done. This is like, okay, here's where we're at, and you all deserve to know.
Right.
Yeah, we actually have a question in the chat box kind of going with that from Marcel that says, how can we keep brands accountable for goals that they make by a definitive date? To Julie's point, as a customer who wants to avoid brands that may greenwash intentionally or by accident. If either of you have an opinion on that, I know that that's definitely a pressing issue in retail right now, as many brands are trying to keep up and show their customers that they're being sustainable, but they're, like you were saying, Julie, maybe overreaching and not necessarily following through on all of these goals.
Definitely. And I have seen from a few years past some brands, and this is where my fear comes from, and I think a lot of people's fear comes from, of, that date has passed and I've seen that they haven't achieved those things, but I haven't seen communication as to why. And I think we've all seen that. I think 2022 was supposed to be a big year before the pandemic. A lot of people were setting goals to 2022, and then sometimes you see them erased. Like I like to check up on other people's impact reports and, sustainability pages and things. And I see things like getting moved around and things like that. So I think that's, biggest nightmare and the biggest thing to avoid. I think, Marcel, that's an amazing question. How do we keep brands accountable? I think something else that is, that definitely came out of the pandemic and our digital connectivity is consumers like holding brands accountable, like as simply as on social media. Like brands cannot hide from comments, they cannot hide from customer feedback, emails, customer feedback emails, like those bubble up to our CEO. Like we've had so many times, so many decisions have been made from emails that people have written. So I think if a consumer is feeling like they don't have much of a power in this conversation, they absolutely do, because if we've learned anything in the last 2 years, it's that the customer will drop you like it's hot if you are not aligned to their values. And if you have an opportunity to learn something from them, you better listen.
I think sometimes it's easier than you would think to see where there's greenwashing, because I think there's goals that appear and disappear, like you said, Julie, or it's a statement, but then there's no backup documentation or backup facts or figures or any kind of transparency about where that statement came from or how that statement's made. And so if you're confused, it's probably with reason. I think when people feel really confident about what they're doing, they want to share all of the reasons that they did it and sort of like track what they can and share everything that they can about it. So if you're confused, I think that's good reason to ask questions. And Julie, like you said, I think those questions can be really powerful, especially in mass through social media.
Alrighty, well, thank you guys for that. That was a great conversation about transparency, since it is so relevant right now. We can head over to our next question, where we would like to talk about, well, Jessica, you're kind of a relatively unique company, and we were wondering kind of what competitors are you working with, if any, and how are you making yourself stand out? And then for you, Julie, there's also brands that are launching their eco-conscious collections, and how are you standing out from those collections? Why should we be shopping the Free People one rather than the next one on the market? And if Jessica, you'd like to start.
Yeah. On the service side and like the work that we do that's more B2B, I think we have the greatest competitor of all, which is the cheap and convenient landfill option. And so really like our greatest competitor is that it's really cheap and very easy to bury things or to burn them, as opposed to doing something that keeps the material, maintains the life of that material and those fibers for longer. And so the way that we are fighting landfill is that transparency. It's really hard for a brand to share that they sent 6,000 pounds to landfill, but to say that they spent 6,000 pounds to us and it was 40% recycled and 60% reused or redistributed, I think gives them more to speak to, and there's some marketability there. It's also, when it goes to landfill, it just goes to landfill. There's no additional information that the brand gets from that outside of marketability. We're sorting by fiber type, and so it's not just the diversion piece, but it's also the characterization of the waste and understanding what it is that you're throwing away. It's understanding what the end of life options are for all of those things. For a company, I think it's a lot to ask for them to be experts at their retail and design and understanding their business, and then also understand textile waste and the current everything that's happening currently in the textile waste world and know what they should be doing and what best case are. And so for us, if we can stay current on what recycling technologies exist, what the best regenerative fibers are, et cetera, then I think it gives them some peace of mind to know that if it goes to Fabscrap, it's going to go where it's supposed to go, and it's going to be sorted the way that it's supposed to be sorted, and I can save time in that way. So that's really where we try to compete with landfill, is with information. And then on the customer side, where we're selling fabric in like more B2C, I mean, there's a lot of fabric stores. I think where we try to differentiate ourselves is that it's all safe from landfill, so it's sustainable. We tell our customers that for every 10 pounds you save from landfill, it has the CO2 reducing equivalent as planting a tree. So there's some environmental benefit. You can feel good about where it's going. Because we're working with 600 brands in New York City, it's also really high quality material at thrift store prices. I think the biggest differentiator is that, like, if you want 100 yards of something, that's probably hard for us to do. But in a more individual sense, if you're looking for 5 to 10, we probably have it. And so that's, I think, our niche is high quality, low quantities, and very affordable. So that's where we're kind of stepping out of the traditional fabric store.
Thank you. I love that your competitor is the landfill. I didn't even think about that. I love that.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I can vouch for the fact that there isn't really a Fabscrap competitor. Like when we were looking for solutions, we didn't find another option at the level of Fabscrap, like not at all. So that makes sense that it's the landfill. There you go. Those are the options. So we need to help Fabscrap grow around the world. This is call to action for everyone. Yeah, I mean, in the competitor space, I don't know. I always think of like first collaboration, who are our collaborators, because that's like the best part about sustainability as a brand. I think it's the first time that we're looking at brands that would normally be competitive as collaborative. And I mean, even at Free People, our platform, even more so on our site than in stores, but also in our stores, we sell many other brands. We sell hundreds of other brands, and they've really been collaborators in sustainability with us. Like Levi's is one of our largest partners, Teva is one of our largest partners, and we launched their waterless denim collection first as a wholesale partner, and with Teva, their recycled Reprieve nylon straps as well. So finding ways to, we sort of encourage them. Do you have anything new coming sustainably? What are you excited about? How can we do something together? We'll promise we'll buy into it. Kind of a conversation, brainstorming with their sustainability teams. And having an open dialogue, and no one holding their cards too close. Like, here's our struggle, and we produce our own denim, but we're not afraid of the competitive nature of like bringing in even more Levi's denim when we know they're doing a great job sustainably. We're also working on sustainable denim, but I think there's room. And Jenna, I think you had a great strong question there, like, why is Free People sustainable product better? And I think we have a great design perspective. I think it's a beautiful product, but I'm not going to tell you that it's more sustainable than other products out there. I think other brands do amazing jobs. Like Reformation that you guys were just listening to is a very, our customer, I think, could shop both places, and I think they've done a phenomenal job. And then I also consider, I look up to the North Stars of like Patagonia and Eileen Fisher, which absolutely don't necessarily have a lot of literal product crossover, but in the fashion space, they're just doing incredible things. And I think they've done such a good job also of being transparent, not to the customer also, but from an industry perspective, so that they can help brands like us show the way and like be our mentors in a way, to help all of us make progress.
Julie, to your point, I had sort of mentioned this in how Fabscrap started, was like a working group of brands who kind of non-competitively shared the problem that they saw in their office. And so like Fabscrap wouldn't exist if everything was competition, because I don't think that those brands would have come to that working group and shared information in a way where like dots could be connected effectively. And so I think sustainability requires a lot of like interdisciplinary and like cross-department work. And so I think competition is almost ineffective in sort of where we need to move as an industry to fight climate change and really address sustainability. For it to be sustainable, it's not going to be great if one person owns that solution and doesn't share it so that all brands can use it and the industry can change. What we're looking for is a change in industry standard. And so for leaders to be able to share that is so important. And so, yeah, I think competition is not maybe in sales, but just in when we're talking about sustainability and making those changes, I think that is like the enemy more so than anything.
We do also have a question that's coming from the chat box. I think Maggie is asking if she'd like to unmute herself and go ahead and ask.
Hi guys, I'm Maggie all the way from Minnesota, but wanted to ask, what is one area of reducing waste that all fashion companies, vendors, and retailers should be asking or should be acting on first, or should already possibly be doing to start their waste reduction journey? And then what is potentially a future goal for vendors and retailers to have for their waste reduction?
I mean, I'm going to say like start with your fabric waste, because I think for a company, one of the reasons why I think Fabscrap gets adopted so quickly is that it's very internal. There's not a customer facing element. You don't have to share that you're doing it if you don't want to, but it's a quick change that you can make in the design process to reduce your company's waste from the company side, while learning about, like, for example, if you can't recycle spandex with us, then that means wherever you're using spandex in your designs, your customers are not going to be able to recycle that item. And so I think starting there, but that's also just because that's where I'm working. I'm sure there's probably some bigger fish to fry, but that's an easy step. And I think that's why Fabscrap has been so well adopted by so many brands.
I definitely agree with your fabric for sure. And then assuming that the fashion and retailers we're talking about are also designing product themselves, designing into waste reduction is also needs to be simultaneous. So on both ends of the system, you're looking at what's coming out and, not also keeping an eye for like, how do we reduce what's coming through the system piece? And that design piece is, also massively challenging, also because of there are optimistic people also in sales departments that also want to sell a lot, and they're optimistic business people. So, balancing that, but understanding what designing to waste reduction looks like at first sketch. And when you're placing those orders, I think is massive.
I think Nancy and I do have a few more questions, so I'll send it over to Nancy so she can ask one of them.
Sure. I think actually Aditi had her hand up. Aditi, if you want to unmute yourself and ask your question, please.
Hello, everyone. My name is Aditi. I'm an international student from India. I had a question regarding technology. So I've been doing so many research papers on how technology is becoming an integral part of fashion. So I wanted to ask you guys, do you see yourself experimenting with any kind of advanced technology to optimize your operations, or are you currently using some different form of technology?
Yeah, I can start. There's some interesting things happening on like our side of the waste world with fabric. I identifying fabrics. So there's some cool like optical sort technology that we're just hearing about and looking at. We're also keeping an eye on a few like fiber to fiber technologies so that when they're ready to take volume, we have a very clean feedstock to send them. And so we know what we should be sorting for. And so those are two pieces that we're really interested in. And then I've seen a couple just in being like on panels like this or at sustainability events that I think are really cool, specifically around sizing and fit. And that like if the customer can more accurately choose the correct size and the best fit, then hopefully there's less returns. And so some waste savings there. So I think there's a lot of technology happening in the space. We're particularly looking like end of life recycling and fabric identification for sorting.
I think that sizing conversation is so exciting. I mean, I think there's not a lot of transparency in the industry about what happens to returns. They don't usually go back on the shop floor, and they definitely don't usually get sent to you if you're e-shopping. So there's a whole other waste stream opportunity. Yeah, but in our world, something that we have implemented a little over a year ago that has been a big success is Clo. So this is a software that we basically use for sampling, where it basically has taken the place of the traditional design, send a sample or a sketch over to a factory, then they physically send it back. Maybe this is a production center halfway across the world, and then we're sending a sample back and forth. Maybe where deadlines are tight, so we're overnighting it. But Clo is a software that uses very, I would say, realistic imagery. We try to get it as close as possible. We even have like the fit models that we actually use, like they've done like 3D scans into the system, so that basically we're doing fits in 3D, like online. So it's really reduced the number of packages we're sending. It's reduced the number of samples we're creating. It's also reducing our lead time, which is a business win as well as a sustainable win. So Clo's been really exciting for that. And then this has been like a long-term research project for us, is fiber to fiber recycling, and working with innovations in how can we recycle our own goods to create goods from things that we don't necessarily use anymore.
Great.
Can I add one more?
Yes, go ahead.
I think there's been also a lot of talk about RFID tags and using that as a way to track garment and maybe even fiber and fabric in the construction of a garment all the way through to end of life, which I think is exciting. So I think there's a lot to happen in like tracking and circularity of the components of a garment and then the garment itself, like past point of sale. So that's interesting. And I think one of the things that I am interested in there too is that there's a lot of wearable tech, but that also has like recycling and end of life implications. And so just thinking through deconstruction and things like that for where technology integrates with garments.
Great. Jessica, there's actually a question in the box for you. Michelle has asked any plans to open up on the West Coast.
Yes. In January of 2020, I was in LA for a little over a week, and we had picked out a warehouse and we were starting to interview potential employees for the West Coast. So we were moving in that direction, and then COVID happened. So those plans have been put on hold. I think right now, New York is getting back to where it was. We're really excited to open Philadelphia. And so West Coast, probably LA, is where we would be heading next. So yes, we have had and currently have plans for West Coast.
Okay. So I have a final question. And of course, if any more questions come in, we have a couple more minutes. So Logan actually earlier in the session before mentioned the crystal ball, and my last question does address the future. So looking ahead a couple of years down the road, where do you see your work? How do you see things changing? What's ahead? So Julie, why don't you begin, please?
I mean, Jess, when you're talking about RFID and really very specific, transparent mapping, I get very excited. I mean, we have a ways to go. We're collaborating actually with LAM, with Professor Andrea Kennedy's class on what supply chain mapping can look like throughout our garment process, and just thinking about what that could look like at the whole next level. It gets me really excited. Also, regenerative agriculture and finding opportunities for, I'd say, increasing our connection to the soil, and the soil that our garments, that the plants that turn into threads that turn into garments are made of. This is something that, I mean, we're a lifestyle brand. We're always dreaming big. This is a dream project that we've sort of had in a big pie in the sky meeting last week, actually. And just like how we need to get closer to our soil, and thinking about what that relationship with, you know, regenerative. We do produce garments with quite a bit of linen and hemp as well. So there's beautiful regenerative properties. What about farming, and what if we take it all the way back to the soil? I'm like very excited about that.
Great. Jessica, how about you? What's your crystal ball look like?
Yeah, a few things. I'd love to be West Coast. That was one of them. And then potentially looking at some international, there's been a lot of interest from other cities where there's a lot of fashion industry happening. More importantly though, I think Fabscrap does a lot of recycling and reuse, but we'd like to go to like the third R, the more important one, which is reduction. And just looking at what we collect from brands, 75% of it are swatches and headers. And so what we really want to do is pull together some of our brand partners to take some leadership with their mills and start to find another way to share that information. If it's sample yardage, that's great because that's reusable by somebody or resellable, or at least audit the recyclability and sort of the sustainability of what's essentially a marketing piece for the mills, so that there's sort of a grade of how easy is it to deconstruct, how easy is it to recycle, how much fabric are you actually sharing in that swatch, so that we can start to shift that towards something that's a lot more sustainable. So moving towards reduction and having brands start to pull in their mills and make changes in that direction, I'm really excited about. And then eventually I'd like to use all of this transparency and all of these brand relationships to inform some policy around waste reduction and sustainability in the fashion industry that hopefully is realistic and meaningful, and not something that happens too fast where no one can comply effectively or nonprofits are overrun because everybody's trying to figure out a solution. And so I think working on policy is where I'd really like to move.
Thank you.
To add on to that, I am based in Spain right now, so I'm based in Europe, and I have to say, not to get too political, but policy does look a little bit different in most of Europe compared to the United States. And it is, I have to say, as a consumer, it's incredible to see what that progress looks like in even multinationals. And I can say this from our own brands. Urban Outfitters Europe sustainability plan is a few steps ahead of Urban Outfitters and Americas. And this is a direct result of policy and seeing Zara's in Europe versus Zara's in the United States. And I think brands will do as little as they have to do because there's so much else going on that policy is really the needle that pushes forward. It's
definitely how we raise the floor, I think, of like the bare minimum just needs to be a lot higher.
Well, thank you both so much for sharing how you are each reducing waste, and also for sharing the future and hopes and all the wonderful work that you're doing. Jenna, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that this was a really exciting conversation coming from a really small company and a really large company, and seeing how you both are tackling the issue of waste. It was really inspiring, and I'm like so excited about RFID tags. I'm like, so we had a whole conversation with Saga Furs, and that has made me so excited about it. So to hear that it's in other brands' conversations is really exciting, and I'm excited for that for the future. And just thank you for that great conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you, Jenna. Thanks, Nancy. Thanks, Jess. So good to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you so
much. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you all so much. Jessica, Julie, Nancy, and Jenna, it was wonderful hours spending with you.